F1 has a problem. The sprint format is becoming increasingly unpopular, and with more and more drivers speaking out, the sport has announced they will make changes. What is the sprint format? To start with, let's explain what sprint races are. Introduced in 2021, the sprint format is a 100km shortened race. In theory, there should be no pit stops unless you need to make repairs, meaning that drivers should start and end on the same set of tyres. In the beginning, the final order of the sprint would then go on to dictate the grid order for Sunday's race. But in 2023 that changed, and the sprint essentially became its own event. Under the current regulations, drivers qualify for the main race on Friday, then on Saturday they will have to quali for the sprint, known as the sprint shootout, before the sprint race later that same day. Points are awarded, with the winner getting 8 and all the way down to P8 receiving some kind of points handout. In 2023, 6 venues held sprint races, and they were at Baku, Spa, Austria, Qatar, Austin and Sao Paulo. Why were sprint races introduced? As Formula 1 has exploded in interest, the sports bosses have looked for a way to maximise their profits. Traditionally, the Friday, which would just have 2 practice sessions, was less well attended than Saturday and Sunday, and F1 bosses wanted to give more competitive action to those in the stands. Under the sprint rules, there will be at least 1 competitive session every day, which F1 hopes will encourage more fans to come on a non-race day. What's the problem with the sprint? On paper, the sprint format may sound like a good idea, but in reality, they fail to produce many exciting races. With no pit stops, teams don't have a chance to get creative when it comes to strategy. This often means the final order is very similar to the one that started it. Another issue is that with a maximum of 8 points on offer, the risk to reward ratio is far too skewed in favour of the risk. The sprint race typically occurs just 24 hours before the Grand Prix, meaning if a driver has a big crash, then the team will face an overnight repair job to make sure the car is fixed again. And if they change anything like the engine, then that's one less taken out of their allocation for the year. These issues have led to a number of complaints, most notably from one man. Max Verstappen speaks out. If you want to define one man most against sprint races, you need to look no further than the reigning 3-time world champion. Born as what many would describe as a pure racer, Verstappen has raised his objection to any kind of alliteration with the weekend format. Verstappen said in Austin, "If you want my honest opinion about sprint weekends, I don't get really excited by it. I just feel like once you complete Friday qualifying, you're a bit lost. I feel like we only need 1 qualifying in the weekend where you really put everything on the line and it feels great. This morning as well, I put it on P1 and I was like, it's a Saturday, there's not many points anyway for the race. And besides that, like now we've done this race, everyone more or less knows what's going to happen tomorrow between all the cars in terms of pace, so it takes away a bit of the excitement of it. If we had not done today and we only have the qualifying that we had yesterday, you don't really know what's going to happen in the race. It's exciting to turn on the TV because you don't know, and also we don't know, but now we know." And this is coming from a man who's won all but 5 of the sprint races since they were invented. Verstappen's main issue is that having a mini race on the Saturday not only prevents teams from finding the perfect car setup for the race, but it essentially spoils the Grand Prix by giving an idea what will happen. Has the sprint affected sales? Of course, F1's main goal with the sprint race was not a sporting objective, but instead a financial one. But has it really helped in that regard? According to Circuit of the Americas' Bobby Epstein, the answer is no. It didn't help, Epstein said about the addition of the sprint race on ticket sales. "It's a surprise. You have to decide, at what point are people coming for the event as much as they are for the sport? I think it still remains to be seen whether the sprint race is something the fans are embracing or it's more controversial. You've got people that are proponents of it, people that are advocates, and others that say I like it the way it was. So it's still an experiment at this point." What next? It's clear F1 will not abandon this project, but at a recent meeting of the F1 Commission, the sport did admit it needed changes. The Commission, which is made up of representatives from all F1 teams, governing body, the FIA and Formula 1 itself, said it gave overall support for an update to the sprint format for 2024 to further rationalise the weekend by separating sprint activities from those for the Grand Prix. The Sporting Advisory Committee will work through specific details, particularly regarding timing and parc fermé regulations, for a final proposal to be presented to the F1 Commission for the first meeting of 2024. F1 president Stefano Domenicali then hinted at further changes without revealing exactly what was in store. Speaking to Sky Sports in Abu Dhabi, Domenicali said, "We will do something. I cannot spoil anything that we're discussing, but I think what we're going to do is to consider all the lessons learned from this year. I think that what you will see is something that you will appreciate. And what is great is that the survey that we did all around the world, that the fans love this format, and we have the duty to fine-tune the things that will consider also people and fans that are not really in love with that format. That will change because they're getting smaller." What are the alternatives? Well, there's been no end to suggestions put forward. One of the main ones has been championed by F1 commentator David Croft, who wanted a separate championship for the sprint to be introduced. Crofty said, "We need to think about the show and the spectacle, and marketing sometimes needs to be a bit more important than engineering. But we also need to keep that balance in engineering as well, and I think we're getting there with the sprint. I think the sprint concept is good, I like it, but I don't like it being part of the World Championship. I'd like 2 separate World Championships, like cricket has T20, ODIs and Test match, and we'll keep them separate." Another suggestion came from none other than Carlos Sainz, who believes reversing the grid could have the kind of positive impact F1 wants. The Ferrari driver said, "I have an idea. I will still do the sprint weekends in a reverse championship order grid. Just imagine, let's say Max starting last, the Ferrari starting P16 or 14th or 13th. The whole field would be closing on each other. And if you put points up until P10, I'd be starting P14 saying, I can get to the top 10 or top 5. Max starting from P20 would believe he can get to the top 10 with the Red Bull. Everyone who's starting P8, they might be the only points they get in the whole year. Not this year, because everyone's getting points, but in other years, you would be holding on to that P1, P2, P3 for your life. So the racing that you would get that day would be incredible, and it doesn't affect the rest of the weekend. You still have the main race that everyone cares about, but you have that race on Saturday to talk about something else." There's a few drivers that have asked for it. Like we said, if you really want the sprint weekend to make it interesting and to make the sprint race different, why don't we try this? Another option entirely out of the box could be to give young rookies a shot. One of the biggest problems with drivers getting into Formula 1 is that there are only 20 seats on offer, and with the existing teams reluctant to let another competitor in, that number is unlikely to increase anytime soon. For a young driver, this means practice time is at an extreme premium. Teams can run a young driver in their car, but the car in question has to be at least 2 years old, which means if there is a big regulation change, like there was in 2022, young drivers are coming in cold turkey. So then, why not open the sprint up to them? The likes of Liam Lawson would have been given a chance to compete earlier on in his career. It also opens doors for the likes of Mick Schumacher and Daniel Ricciardo, who found themselves without a seat at the start of the year. In terms of the weekend format, the regular F1 drivers could go back to how things were while the sprint will still take place on Saturday. In terms of the cars, allow the teams to have a third car on sprint weekend, meaning the regular drivers do not have to worry about their car being damaged. Questions to answer for F1. Ultimately, the sprint is becoming an incredibly big problem for F1. It's clear they're never going to give up what they feel is another chance to make more money, but they also have to recognise that almost no one is in favour of it as it currently is. But what do you think? Let us know in the comments what changes you would make to the sprint weekend for 2024 onwards. In the meantime, be sure to like the video and hit subscribe so you never miss a release here on the DRS Straight.